All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us.
You've reached the internet's home for all things Masonry. Join On the Level podcast as we plumb the depths of our ancient craft and try to unlock the mysteries, dispel the fallacies, and utilize the teachings of Freemasonry to unlock the greatness within each of us. I have you now.
Let's go! Yes! Ladies and gentlemen, boys, girls, children of all ages, welcome back to On the Level podcast. My name is Matt Stone. We are joined by brother Chris Burns here today. I'm going to let him introduce our guest. But while I have you, if you would please take a second, like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of fun stuff. Share the show. Let everybody know where we are so that way this podcast can be used as a tool here in the state of Florida to promote peace and harmony. So, brother Chris Burns, who do we have on the show today?
What's up? Hey, Matt. Good to
What's
see
up,
you
buddy?
again. And your nice button down today. Very
Yeah,
nice.
I'm actually trying to snazz it up a little bit there, bud.
I like that. Okay, so today we have a special guest, very special guest, Chris Wadsworth. And brother, I'm not sure what your official title is. What do we call you? President? What's your official title?
El Jefe.
You just call me Chris.
I've gotten in trouble for not saying titles, so if you could tell me what title we call you, I'd really appreciate it.
You may call me Chris or Captain My Captain. There you go.
Oh, Captain, my captain.
Captain, my captain. Chris Wadsworth. So you are now the president of the newly recognized by the Grand Lodge of Florida Widow's Sons Group. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Wow, that's awesome. It's great to have you with us. Thank you for coming on. So let's start out with you. A lot of brothers might not know who you are in the state of Florida. I know you're in the southeast there, in like the Miami-ish area. So I'm sure everybody knows you down there at least.
Sure.
So
So
for the other brothers, who's
Yeah,
Chris
yeah.
Wadsworth?
yeah, no, I'm part of Hibiscus Lodge number 275. I'm a Shriner, Scottish Rite, York Rite. Run down the list.
Oh, you pay all the dues.
I pay all the dues. I'm an attorney down here. I have a law firm in Miami with offices in Palm Beach, Broward County, Punta Gorda, Jacksonville, and New York. We have about 30 lawyers. I have 30 lawyers and about 50 support staff. I've been practicing law for 29 and a half years, going on 30. I'm a trial lawyer, so that's my job is trying cases. So I try between 10 to 15 cases a year, the stuff you see on TV with the juries and all that kind of stuff. It's all civil litigation, but we do everything in civil litigation from property to defending against Morgan & Morgan. I'm sure everyone knows what Morgan & Morgan is,
Oh,
right? Yeah. So that's what I do.
For the people.
That Pillsbury Doughboy, if he could stay away from the medical marijuana thing, that would be just capital. I would be totally okay with that.
He's a billionaire, just so you know.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I've heard.
You're not a billionaire yet?
No.
The funny thing is whenever he was running for some sort of office or something like that, and he had to drive through Polk County, and he was like, I dare Grady to pull me over. And Grady was like, let's do this. Let's go. Then he stopped at a bar over in North Lakeland and just really showed his rear end. It was a little place called Boots and Buckles. It was the funniest thing. But I do have to ask, if you're an attorney and you're an actual trial attorney, how many times in court have you uttered the phrase, I want the truth, and someone screams back, you can't handle it? It's like for the free bird of attorneys in my book.
So the funny thing is, I actually say stuff like that in voir dire. So voir dire is when you pick a jury before. I say, how many people come in here and think like there's going to be a Perry Mason moment, right, where someone stands up and said, I did it, or you can't handle the truth. And I go, it's not going to happen. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be boring. It's going to be a lot more boring than that.
Yeah.
Just try to stay awake, buddy, okay? Just don't fall asleep and you'll be winning.
Exactly. It's not going to be like that. I promise you. But anyway, so I joined the Widow's Sons 6 years ago. That was a Masonic Riding Association at the time. And I am president of the Eastwood Riders chapter and have been since 2020. And then this new chapter of the Widow's Sons that I think why I'm on this podcast now. That's it.
Well,
I can give you a history of the Widow's Sons if you want.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start because our brother Matt Stone here is somewhat new to the fraternity, and I'm sure he and others could use a little background on who the Widow Sons are. Now, I know before we get into that, I'll say I'm not a Widow Son. I've never been one. I don't ride motorcycles.
Sure.
But when I became a Master Mason, like I didn't know anything about Masonry, right? So I went through my entered apprentice and fellowcraft degree, pretty normal. But the morning of my Master Mason degree, I show up to the lodge, and there's like 100 motorcycles outside, and I'm like, whoa! I'm double checking, am I in the right place?
Right.
And I walk in, and it's all gray beards with rubber bands and tattoos and leather, and I'm like, shitting my pants, to be honest with you. I'm definitely in the wrong place. And everybody was so welcoming, so kind. Those guys did the majority of the work in the second half of the degree, which
Right.
was really impressive. My first introduction to the Widow Sons was just shock and awe. I was totally impressed with how scary you were on the outside and how awesome and kind everybody was on the inside.
Right. So, that's kind of the thing. We're like the pole bearers for Masonry. You know what I mean? In other words, we're very visible, especially if we're having a rally or we're all riding or whatever, very visible. And the idea is to shine a good light on Masonry. And, motorcycles and black vests always get the media's attention. And
Right.
I'll get into that in a minute, but I can give you the brief history of the Widow Sons is back in 1998 in Illinois, a little diner, a guy named Carl Davenport was with probably 4 or 5, and I'm sure someone will correct me and tell me, no, it was 6. It was 4 or 5 guys. They all ride motorcycles and they were Masons. And Carl said, hey man, wouldn't it be great if we formed a Masonic riding association, right? So remember up in Illinois, Chicago area, that's where the Outlaws were born. That's the one percenters, the motorcycle club, the bad guys, like Sons of Anarchy stuff. There's a lot of motorcycle clubs up there. So, I can't climb into Carl's head, and I've never spoken to Carl, but my thought was, hey, let's set up a good guy, motorcycle riding association that are Masonic. So they decided to call themselves the Widow Sons after Hiram Abiff, right? So we're all Master Masons. We're all Widow Sons because of Hiram Abiff.
People might not know who, like, outside of Freemasonry, I know not many people have heard the name Hiram Abiff.
Sure.
If you're not a Mason and you're listening, Hiram Abiff is kind of like the central character of our core degrees in Freemasonry. He's known as the Builder. He's known to be a Widow Son, who I think hails from Naphtaliah, a tribe, and is known as a Builder. And he was a Tyrian person who was sent to help King Solomon build Solomon's temple.
Correct.
So that's who you guys have chosen as your name.
Correct.
The Widow Sons.
And in the back of every vest, or most vests, you'll see Hiram Abiff. You'll see a little patch at the bottom. I can go get my vest and show you. It says Hiram Abiff.
I should have worn my "Who is James Mason" shirt
Because
it has the Widow Son logo on the back of it, and it was a Widow Son who made those shirts.
That was Joe.
That was Joe.
Joe Shaw, yeah.
I
So,
love that guy.
so with that aside, Carl Davenport formed a rudimentary web page, but really never did much with it. They rode together, but they didn't get vests or any of that other stuff, right? So then in 1999, a guy named Armando Nunez, affectionately called Army, he had the same idea. It's one of those things where you put something out in the universe and everybody has the same idea around the same time.
Yeah.
So Armando lived in the Tampa area at the time in 1999, and he did a web search and he found Carl Davenport's group. So then he talks to Carl and calls him up or whatever. And turns out that Carl never did a back patch or vest or things like that. So Armando decided he was going to do that. So he did. And that's when he came up with the Elvira patch. And
Yes.
I'm going to text you where they got it from, if you're okay with that. And you can maybe.
That was part of, I think, the problem that the Grandmaster had with the Widow Sons is he felt that this patch was a little too provocative.
Shocker, it's Elvira. I don't even know what the patch is, and I can already tell you it's Elvira. It's probably going to be provocative.
All right, so Chris, I just texted you where they got the Elvira patch from. It's a little comical. But anyway, so Elvira is affectionately called Elvira. That's not actually, what it's called. She's the widow, and she's
Okay.
supposed to be a widow who is grieving the loss of her husband, who is a Mason, and trying to figure out how she's going to provide for herself and her family. Okay, so that was the idea. Armando brings all the patches up to Chicago to hand them over to Carl Davenport, and there you go. The widow sons are born, right? Except
This was your previous patch, right?
correct. And I sent you the
That's
actual
not that bad.
via text. I sent you the actual where they got it from. Okay, because
Not that bad.
it's a Japanese anime, and she's actually
Okay.
in real life holding a samurai behind her head,
Yeah.
and so they just kind of dubbed it out.
So this was the image that apparently the late most worshipful coward felt was too much, right?
He didn't like it, right?
Yeah.
She's a sea ninja. Anyway, so apparently the Carl Davenport group up in Illinois didn't really like the patch very much either. And, I don't know how long it took, but they said, look, we're not going to use this patch. We're going to go to the pyramided wings and, the working tools and all this other stuff. And Army said, no, well, we're going to keep the widow. So there was a loose agreement where the southern states would have the widow and the northern states would have the pyramided wings. Fast forward,
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Fast forward to today, and Florida is the only state with a widow. There were a couple of other states here and there that had them, and then they phased them out. And they all went to the pyramid wings. Give me an idea.
Florida was the last holdout. We were the last one using that.
That's it.
Oh
They're
wow!
The widow sons are in 92 countries.
Wow.
92 countries. They all use the pyramided wings. So I want to say 40 states, 92 countries. It's a huge organization. Now,
So they're all using this is your new patch that we were showing.
ours is a little variation. So where we have the hourglass, the sprig, and the column, they have the working tools. That's the only difference.
Oh, okay. So you just chose
Okay.
different symbols here.
Right.
Was there a reason? Did you guys have any meaning behind
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So the guys that are much smarter in the esoteric Masonry could probably tell you the reason for those three things better than I could. I mean, I can tell you what the
Well,
working tools are for.
I'm very familiar with these symbols and what they
Yeah,
mean.
they're in every lodge, right? They're in every lodge.
Yeah. This is a symbol of human life, so life and death.
Right.
This is a symbol of the broken. This is broken column, so this is
Correct.
symbolizing the brokenness of man and the loss of Iron Biff,
And then the
fall
sprigification is
is obviously eternal. Yeah.
Right. So there you go. They felt that the working tools we already have it meet on the level, part upon the square, which is really the working tools. So that was the patch. That was the patch that we went with. And if you actually count the feathers on the wings, the one on the left has 23 feathers. The one on the right has 19 feathers. 2319 is the W and S in Widow Sons when you count in the alphabet.
That's
So
cool.
Now we're doing masonry.
yeah, there you go. So you fast forward to today and you have that many Widow Sons. That was kind of the beginning of the Widow Sons back then. So Florida always claims that we are the originals because even though Carl Davenport had the idea in 98, didn't do much with it. Army Nunez was the one who really kicked it off in 1999. In any event,
that's okay. It's a fairly new organization, 1999.
26 years, right?
Fairly, I mean, Freemasonry being over 300 years old.
Yeah.
So you guys got into some stuff last year. I mean, you went normal, things were going on.
So what had happened was the Widow Sons never submitted paperwork to the Grand Lodge to become recognized and approved. And it's in the digest that if you base your membership on being a Master Mason, and I'll backtrack a little bit. So when Army Nunez formed this organization, you had to do two things. You had to be a Master Mason and you had to own a motorcycle. Okay. Those are the only two requirements. If you wanted to be a Widow Son, Master Mason, own a motorcycle, and you can ride with us, right? So the Widow Sons never submitted their paperwork to the Grand Lodge to be acknowledged and approved. Never. 1999,
So does
2000.
that? I mean,
Running.
what does that really mean? That just means you aren't recognized by the Grand Lodge. I mean, you can still
Right.
operate, right, without being recognized by the Grand Lodge, can't you?
Incorrect. So
No.
if you read the digest and you are premising your membership on being a master mason, that means you have to be a master mason to be in the group, and you're not recognized by the Grand Lodge, you cannot operate. They can pull your dues card. I mean, you can operate, but you're not going to be a master mason anymore. That's in the digest. And the reason behind that is, the Grand Lodge, if they're masters and wardens, Shriners, you run through it, right? They're all under the Grand Lodge.
Right. The
So
Scottish Rite, the York Rite,
all of them,
High
right?
12,
There you
everything.
go. Every single one of them. So the Widow Sons had kind of been operating outside the radar, but we would still work with the Grand Lodge hand in hand. We would present them honorary vest every year to the Grand Master. George Aladra was the only one who refused to take a vest back in like 2012. 2013, all those guys took them. And obviously last year it wasn't done with Most Worshipful Grandmaster Don Cowart, rest his soul. Most Worshipful Grandmaster Don Cowart decided, hey, look, it got like 73 organizations that are operating that we got to be a master mason, but they haven't submitted their paperwork to us. So he issued decision number 2, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and it really just cited the digest.
Very familiar with it. This was the. I
Right.
got a call from the Grandmaster on that one because I published that on our district group page, which I do for every edict that I've ever
Right.
seen come out for any Grandmaster. But that one was so controversial that there were people from out of state really laying into the wisdom behind that decision. And so I got a call from the Grandmaster that said, take it down. I don't want it there.
Right.
So I took it down.
So
that was rough.
Technically, he's accurate and correct, right? According to the digest, he didn't say anything that was incorrect or not. So this was a year ago, which it was, I think, mostly directed to the Widow Sons because we were probably the largest organization that had not submitted our paperwork.
Weren't you even mentioned? Weren't the Widow Sons specifically called out?
I don't think so, but well, I don't recall. I don't think so, but it's very possible.
Oh, maybe I'm thinking of because there was another one that involved what you can wear to lodge, and he specifically said you can't wear the patches of the Widow Sun.
Right, the vest or the Widow Sun's vest, right. So, because we used to be able to wear a long sleeve shirt with a tie and our vest. And the idea behind that was to kind of, other Masons would be like, what do you got? What is that? And you would say,
yeah.
Hey, they go, I ride motorcycles. You'd be like, great, come on over. That's the idea. But anyway.
You guys raise a ton of money. I mean, I know the 2 chapters that were near me, they were always out fundraising, all the lodges. They were always raising more money than we were for charities.
I can tell you that at the Eastwood Riders, we raised $10,000 to $20,000 to $30,000. I mean, a lot of money. Last year, we handed out turkeys and boxes of food to everyone at Thanksgiving. We support the young Marines. We sent them to Hawaii on a trip. You know what I mean? Like we do a lot.
That's Masonry right there.
Right. So the idea when they first formed the Widow Sons was, hey, fellowship and a good time. But when you get a bunch of Masons together, fellowship and good time means raising money for charity because that's what we do.
Exactly.
That's how we have a good time, right? We go and we hand a check over for $10,000, and then we go to the bar and have a beer and go, man, that was great. Feels so good. So we became, I think, a fairly large organization that raises a lot of money for charities. We support the DeMolay down here. They go to conclave every year. We pay for it. Nice. You know what I mean? So for the young kids, I'm all about kids. That's our future. Last year, when that edict came down, being a lawyer that I am, I prepared all of the bylaws that needed to be submitted to the Grand Lodge to get recognized and approved. And we had a meeting. And you can read it on the transparency page. You can read it in my statement. We had a meeting, but not all the presidents were present at the meeting, right? So the way the Widow Sons works, or used to work, was you had Council of Presidents. You had 20 chapters, 20 presidents, and the presidents would vote on stuff, right? Kind of like a republic.
And it was just a majority is all that was needed to pass things?
Two-thirds. So
2/3. Okay.
Yeah. So we go to this meeting, but not all the presidents are there. Only some of them are there. And my intent, along with a couple of the other guys, was to say, hey, this is what we need to do. We need to submit this. I'm pretty confident. I've been a lawyer a long time. I'm going to be able to work through the red tape. I'm going to be able to call them out and get it done.
Yeah.
So instead, what happened, the meeting went sideways and people were like, well, I don't know, I'm from Cuba and we had a dictator before and we don't want a dictator now. And I tried to say, look, if you're a Mason, the most worshipful Grand Master is a dictator. And
Yes.
and he'll admit he is.
Yes.
He may be a benevolent one, he may be a good one, but what he says goes, and it's in our obligation. And I won't recite our obligation, but I think we all know, right? Do
Yep.
signs and summons and edicts, right? So
Yep.
I said, so if you're a Mason, you've already got to be under the Grand Lodge, whether it's be a widow son or not. So why not just play within the rules? No, I'm not. He's not telling me what to do, and that's not the way this works. We're Freemasons. Okay. So
That was emotions were running
too
out
much
at
emotion.
that point, it sounds like.
Right. So what happened was they decided, all right, we're just going to sidestep it, and we're in our own internal bylaws. We're going to remove the requirement that you're a master Mason. We're going to make our
Part of his edict was he gave you like a certain amount of time to demit, or you were not going to be a Mason anymore, right? That was what really angered people, I think.
right, or submit your paperwork.
Or submit the paperwork, right?
Right. And as soon as
And
you
I know
submit your paperwork,
they,
to be honest with you, under the Grand Lodge rules, as soon as you submit your paperwork, you're safe. Even if he doesn't approve it, he kicks it back and you kick it back during
at
that.
least you're in the process, right? Like
Exactly.
yeah.
You're in the process and therefore you're safe, right? You're allowed to operate. And so they decided they wanted to remove everything in our bylaws that required you to be a Mason, make our wives associate members. And I did that for them, right? I'm a lawyer. Hey, can you do that? Sure. Whatever.
So that was like what the 2/3 majority wanted?
2/3 majority at that meeting, which did not include all of the presidents.
Right. It was okay. Gotcha.
So I'm not sure it was 2/3 globally.
All of them, right?
Right. So went through, cleaned up the bylaws. You don't have to be a Mason anymore. They created a board, just like on a transparency page says, they created a board that's going to guard the West Gate, which means you're not going to be a widow son if you're not a master Mason. And this is the way it was going to roll. Don Cowart wrote, I'm not going to say God rest his soul every time, but Don Cowart wrote a letter and asked what we had done to come in compliance with decision number 2. And I helped the president pen a letter. Helped means I wrote it and he signed it. It's like any lawyer, right? Like, hey, can you help me do this? Yeah, you write it, and then maybe you change the comma or one word, and then and basically it just said, look, we're no longer a Masonic Writing Association. We're no different than the American Legion or the VFW or the Lions Club. So that's what we did. So he kind of just left us alone, and I think he was frustrated probably. And I always thought, really, that this was going to be a temporary move until Don moved on, right? So the most worshipful Grand Master is only in power for 1 year.
Right.
Thereafter, most worshipful Grand Master Tolly was coming up. He's very reasonable. I know him. He comes to my lodge quite often. The guy behind him, and I'll screw up all the names of these guys right up front. It's no disrespect.
Pascal Vest
Right.
is behind him, and then you got Rick Windley.
Pascal Vest is a member of the Low 12. So, talk about you got a friendly line coming up that can really work with you and help you get cemented in with the Grand Lodge and not have to worry anymore, right? Because that's always the big concern. Well, what, there was like, all right, so you get us approved. What happens if the next guy that comes in wants to kick us out? I go, well, that's always the fear, right? I mean, it happened in Kansas. They kicked out the Scottish Rite. I'm sorry, the Shriners. They kicked out the Shriners because the Shriners started letting non-Masons become Shriners. So the Grand Lodge of Kansas went, you're out. And when I spoke to Most Worshipful Grandmaster Tolly, he told me that. He goes, I don't understand. He goes, obviously, we have that power, but we only do that if you're doing something unmasonic or not acting like a good Mason or, you break the rules in some manner.
And that, that happened, I know. here and there, things would happen. Things would get posted online that maybe they didn't like that happened while there was like a Masonic logo or a Widow's Sons logo in the shot. I know that a few little things like that happened, but they didn't seem to be like, that wasn't the norm. It seemed like there were just a couple of problems here and
I
there.
can promise you the things that got posted that upset people wouldn't upset you normally. Like, hey, there's 3 widow sons at a bar with their vests on and you can see them drinking alcohol. You're like,
Right.
yeah, or,
It kind of comes with the territory at that point. Like, how do you?
right. So, guy in Daytona at Bike Fest is wearing his vest and he gets a shot from a shot girl and she's wearing, negligee, not negligee, but, like fishnet.
Yeah, like
whatever.
it was provocative dress.
It's provocative. Oh my God, that's horrible. It's terrible. But then, I don't know if you've ever been to the Knights of Arabia or whatever, the belly dancers. And it's not any more horrible than that, to be honest.
I just go back to the shot glass girl. It's like, how dare females have a body and anatomy that actually people enjoy looking at? Some people are repulsed by this. What? How dare we?
It's a jealousy thing. It's like, how dare they get to do that and I don't? I think it's more of that.
I see the point.
It's because you're a 50-year-old male and nobody wants to see you in lingerie, my guy.
So I see the point. I don't disagree with him. Probably shouldn't have had the vest on. We took care of it. We reprimanded the guy. He got suspended. He's actually not a widow son anymore. And that's not why, but you understand, like, hey, you got to be careful, guys. And more importantly, don't post it on social media. You know what I mean? Like, because some people could get the wrong idea, no matter how ridiculous it is. You know how it is, man. You could do anything and 10 people will like it and 100 people tell you they didn't like it. And nobody understands why either has that, opinion.
Which honestly, that actually brings up a kind of a shift or a change that I'm seeing within Freemasonry is you're dealing with a generation that had nothing to do with the internet growing up. And I'm talking about the older generations, but you also have my generation, the millennials, that we were the ones that were told to program the VCR and figure out how to operate the internet, get off the phone so I can hop on the internet for a few minutes. So that's kind of the split that I'm seeing is you have a lot of these guys that they want to post things on social media because it's just kind of what we do in the society today. And then you have the older guard that's like, no, if you log into Facebook, they automatically have your social security number. It's like, that's not the way it works.
So yeah, I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm not a millennial. I'm a Gen Xer, right?
Same here, brother. Same here. We are the best generation alive right now.
So
you old freaking people.
That said,
we're not ruining anything. We're also not revolting. We're like just let's chill, everybody. Let's just be let's be normal.
Yeah, you got to love those things on the internet. We're like, don't mess with Gen Xers, man. They drink from garden hoses. They were let out. They were told to come back at night. There were no phones. No one knew where they were, what they were doing. It's all true.
It's funny. Whenever I tell some of the younger people that I talk to and I mentor, whenever I tell them, I was like, hey, between the time from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m., I was forced almost at gunpoint to get out of the house. And they were like, why? I said, because Days of Our Lives were on and I dare not interrupt Days of Our Lives.
Oh, yeah.
That's funny.
I mean, it was a different time, right? Our parents never gave a second thought to, is my cook going to get kidnapped or raped? It just didn't even matter. It wasn't even a thing that anyone thought about.
Summertime, you jumped on your bicycle at 8 a.m. You didn't get home till 7 or 8 at night. Literally.
Literally, for months, that would be how you rolled. Your parents would be, you're like, you still live here, right? Yeah. I sleep here. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
It was funny. My mom actually had a list of houses that she would call. So like she would call like my buddy Justin's house. If I wasn't there, I was over at Tim's house. She knew where I was. It's just, all right, how many phone calls am I going to make before I get to him?
So that's the generation I come from. Fast forward, prior to Most Worshipful Grandmaster Tully getting into office, I had a lunch with the current president of the Old Widow Sons. Not the Old Widow Sons. I don't know what you call them. The Elvira Widow Sons. We'll call them that.
Right.
They're the original. They're the original Widow Sons in the state of Florida currently. They are. And I told them, look at this, the Council of Presidents, which also is a mistake. They only meet once a year. Okay. So that means you only communicate with the other chapters once a year in person in January. A year is a long time not to have a meeting or to discuss stuff or issue or any of that stuff, right? Now you can have a special Zoom meeting, which no offense to Zoom or this kind of forum, when you got 20 guys on a Zoom conference, not a lot gets done.
Yeah,
Everyone's
right.
talking over each other. One guy can't log on, the other guy's saying,
Yeah.
I mean,
Somebody forgot to wear pants and stood up.
oh yeah, and then it times out. You're like, you only had 30
Somebody's going to
minutes.
be eating peanuts, and it just sounds like a horse chomping at the bit.
I mean, it's just awful. So I already knew the temperature in the Wittesons. The reason that is, I go to all the rallies. I do a lot of riding. Uh, I mean, if I don't put 20,000 miles on a motorcycle in a year, I was injured. You know what I mean? Because I ride a lot. I'll give you an example. I rode from Miami to Savannah. Then I rode 1,000 miles to raise money for the Shriners with the Iron Knights out of Georgia. And then I rode home. So I had to ride to Savannah, then ride 1,000 miles, and then ride home. And it was 3,000 miles in 3 days. Then the following year, I had to do the exact same thing, except we rode 1,200 miles and we were up in South Carolina. So then it was like 3,500 miles in 3 days. But anyway, point is, I ride a lot. So I'm out around these guys a lot. And the temperature was, they never wanted to submit the paperwork to the Grand Lodge because they really felt fear that the next Grand Master would cancel us, so to speak.
Right.
So my problem with that is twofold. Okay. Number one, I don't like to lie. I really don't. And I felt like the whole thing was a lie, right? You're riding around saying you're a non-Masonic riding association, but really you are. And I said, like, what are you going to do if the Grand Master pulls in one of our members and asks him, do you have to be a Master Mason to be a Witteson? He's faced with two choices. One, he can violate his obligation and lie. Or two, he outs the entire organization. Neither one of those things is a good choice. None of that's a good choice. So wouldn't it be better to submit our paperwork, get approved, work with the Grand Lodge, and act like Masons and not have to worry about getting canceled? I mean,
So there was a group of guys that were of that thinking of like, hey, let's just follow the rules here and let's get this thing done and let's get back into Masonry.
There's many that were very upset with the move to get away from Masonry, so to speak. Now, remember what I told you, that in order to be a Witteson, the first thing you have to be is a Master Mason. And then you have to have a motorcycle. So if you just removed the requirement that you're a Master Mason from your bylaws, you can't be a Witteson, right? You can't.
Right.
So it's a problem in any event. So when I had this meeting, this lunch with the president, I said, look, at what I'm going to do is when Tolly gets into office, I'm going to get us approved. I'm not going to go to the COP. Then we can bring
What's
it to
the COP?
Council of Presidents. Sorry.
And that's
The
the
meeting.
Florida. That's
Right.
a Florida term, right?
Yeah.
Now, does Florida answer outside of Florida to any
No,
large?
I'll get to that in a minute. We're all independent.
Okay.
So my point was, if we bring it to the council before, they're going to vote not to submit the paperwork, because I know a few very outspoken that steer the entire group that are against it. And I know that from all year round, hearing them, oh, we're never doing that. Oh, that's never going to happen. And these guys are the ones that once they say something, everyone just follows them on. I said, but if I do this, then we can give them a real choice. It's not a hypothetical, right? Because the argument's going to be, well, they're never going to approve us. It's going to take 6 months to approve us. It's never going to happen. But if I go, here you go, we could either be a Masonic Riding Association because I have us pre-approved or not. Choose. That was the intent. And instead, this happens. So I will say, in the president's defense, he probably didn't realize I would do it as quickly, efficiently, and effectively as I did, right? I've got text messages saying I'm talking to Tolly, I'm smoothing things over with Tolly. All true. I spent 2 hours on the phone with Most Worshipful Grandmaster Tolly. He's a great guy. He's like, I want to work with you guys. I think it's amazing. I want you to work with the Grand Lodge. I want to work charities with you. I said, hey, wouldn't it be great if we rode like an honor guard and escorted you places and did things like that? And he said, that would be amazing. You know what I mean? Like, that's what you're supposed to do when you're a Masonic Riding Association. Imagine, leading Tolly to his next GMOV or whatever. That would be amazing.
Get the news to paying attention to Freemasonry a little bit.
Right. And I've been on the news now 3 or 4 times with the Widow Sons. One, we were raising money and bringing stuff over to the Bahamas. One, we're handing out turkeys. I mean, the news eats this stuff up. They love
Oh
it.
yeah, they love it.
So in any event, in his defense, I don't think I ever told him explicitly I'm handing in the paperwork. I kept saying, I'm talking to Tolly, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And Tolly kept going, look at this is what you need to do this, do that. Um, and you know, he was such a gentleman and such a good brother and counseled us. And, you know, it was all going along great. And I got text messages where I said to the president, hey, pretty soon our guys are going to need to make a choice. And this was because I knew Tolly was going to possibly sign the paperwork, but not for like 3 weeks, right? And he says, I hear you. You know, so obviously he
So
knows.
you were communicating. You
Yeah,
were
but I'm going to be clear. I didn't say, hey, I submitted our paperwork, right? I kind of, ego-wise, I wanted it to be kind of like a surprise, you know, like, hey, man, look what I did. Isn't this
right.
great? You know what I mean? Like, I swear to God, like, isn't this great? Look, I
Yeah.
got it done. And, you know, so I said, hey, I'm smoothing things over with Most Worshipful Grandmaster Tolly. I'm smoothing things over with the Grandmaster. He goes, oh, great. You know, I'm going to get it done, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. And the text messages are in between conversations. And if my wife was here, she just walked in. When they accused me of not telling them, she's like, that's BS. I heard you talking to him on the phone. You were talking on the phone and you told him. I go, I know, but I'm not going to get on the internet and go tit for tat. Yeah, you did. No, you didn't. Yeah, you did. I think really the current president, he's more of a wait and see kind of guy, right? He doesn't necessarily go in. So I think he was just kind of waiting and seeing, and maybe he thought it would take longer. But, you know, I'm the guy, and you probably know this, Chris. If you text me, I text you right back. I don't wait.
Yeah, so I was like, "Hey, Chris, what time? How early can you?" And he said, "Let's do it. It's 6 a.m." And I was like, "Oh, you're like
You're one of
really?"
those.
I'm a
Okay.
military guy, right?
He's
I was in
ready
the
to go.
military 10 years.
I knew you were military immediately when you said, "Let's record at 6 a.m." And I went to Matt and I was like, "Matt, can you get?" And he was like, "No, no, not
That's
at 6
okay.
a.m."
So the funny thing about that is, I don't know why, but for some odd reason, and just kind of give you some backstory, is I have a 3.5-year-old at home, little girl. She's adorable, very articulate, very logical, which pisses me off. But either way, apparently yesterday I got up and left for work before she got up, and she was highly upset to the point where she reprimanded me at lunch. Dad, you can't leave for work until I tell you bye. Don't do that again.
Oh
I'm
wow,
like,
she's gonna make a great wife to some man.
I have an 11-year-old, but he used to be like that. You can't leave without saying goodbye to me.
yep. And honestly, it's adorable, but it's kind of like a cat's in the cradle moment where it's like, I really feel bad for, you know, being at work and traveling for Masonry, and I travel out of state for different stuff. And it's like, I don't get to see my daughter as much as I want to, but this is kind of the life we're called to, right?
Right. And I have the same issue because I try to incorporate my son into almost all of my widow son's activities. And my wife hates it because I'll make her drive him to wherever I'm going. And then he'll hang out with me. And sometimes he'll ride on a motorcycle, but some of these rides are long, right? He's 11, and, you know, he's got the attention span. So they'll ride in the car and I'll find things for him to do. You know, I went to the Grand Gathering in Chicago. They flew out to Chicago together. You know what I mean? Like this,
Yeah.
because of that, I feel like I'm away from him too long. You know what I mean? And I had him late in life, obviously, because I'm old and he's 11. So I got to spend time with him.
So actually, this brings up a question, and now that you've kind of given like a 30,000 foot overview of the situation, this kind of brings up a question. Is I'm familiar with other appendant bodies, and I use quotation fingers on that for those listening on audio. I'm aware of other Masonic appendant bodies that intentionally do not seek the recognition of the Grand Lodge of Florida. So you know, in that aspect, I could kind of see why the other brothers that split off and did their own thing, or however you want to look at it. But either way, the group that is not recognized by the Grand Lodge of Florida, I totally see their side of it. Of they don't want to bend the knee when the person who's in charge for a year could potentially be a tyrannical dictator. And I'm not saying that anybody was, but that very well could possibly happen.
Yes, widow sons is an extension of your fraternity. Okay?
Right.
So you're a Mason, you can be a widow son. Widow sons is an extension of that. So if you're not a Mason, you can't be a widow son.
Right. So this is where I guess some of the confusion was at, because my wife picked up on this widow's son stuff and started asking me about it. And I'm like, I have no idea. Like, how did you figure this out? So my wife started asking me about it, and she's like, well, an appendant body isn't directly controlled by the Grand Lodge, correct? I'm like, no, the Grand Lodge actually has authority if the people in it are supposed to be Master Masons, because that is in our obligation that we're going to be doing this. At the same time, I understand the
Hesitance.
Yeah, well, no, not hesitant. I understand kind of the mythos of motorcycle riders associations, where they don't like, they're very anti-authority, and they're very quick to flip the bird to anybody who would exhibit authority over them. So kind of walk us through the Masonic obligation and how you balance those two out. You have the flavor of Masonic riders, motorcycle riders associations, and then you also have a Masonic obligation, which might be in conflict with that.
Right. So you're correct, right? Guys who ride motorcycles, and background, I've been riding motorcycles for 33 years. I've ridden with the outlaws. I've ridden with the pagans. I've ridden with not patched, just so you know. I was never an MC, but they're friends, and I would ride with them. And, I was always an independent guy. That said, you're correct. So guys who ride motorcycles that are bikers, not just Masons that own motorcycles, but bikers, really hate it when there's someone who has authority over them, right? But, we live in society. Everyone has authority over us, right? You go through a red light, you're going to get pulled over. Guess what? You got authority over you. You get arrested, you go in front of the judge. Guess what? He's got authority over you. So in Masonry, we all decided to become Masons. And when we took our obligations, we agreed and acknowledged and accepted that the most worshipful Grand Master has ultimate authority over us as it relates to the fraternity. We will obey all due signs, summonses. I'm sure I'm not getting it correct perfectly, which is probably a good idea. Edicts, obligations, whatever. So now, as a widow's son, you're not technically really an appendant body. We haven't been given appendant body status, I don't think. I'm not sure how you do that, if it can be done. But when's the last time you saw, the most worshipful Grand Master walk into the shrine and tell them how to run things? Never. Walk into the Templars, tell them how to run things.
Glad.
My point is,
but it's rare. You're right. Like they're not there to try to cause problems. For the most part, they're there to just try to coordinate. And
think about it. He's got 30,000 Masons. Does he really want to run my organization as well? I don't think so.
No.
So the whole point,
I guess it depends on the character archetype that you have sitting in the Grandmaster seat.
Sure. But he can't possibly control them all. It would be too much work, to be honest with you. Really, I mean, the guy would have to work 24 hours a day, and even then he wouldn't be able to do it because there's so many different human beings. That said, his main goal really is to just make sure we're all acting like Masons. And if you're all acting like Masons, you're fine. If you actually handle your own stuff and let him know, hey, we saw this, we're handling it, that's fine. I promise you, that's all they want. They want to know that it's being handled. So if a Shriner gets out of line and does something crazy, he's whatever, he's going to want to hear from that potentate that says, hey, we got this, we're handling it, right? And you don't need to. In my opinion, if someone who Widow Sons did something that egregious, they're probably going to be brought up on Masonic charges, because that's
the thing. Like, you belong to a particular lodge, which means you answer to the worshipful master. He can summon you. He can order you.
Right.
He has control over you.
So my point is, if you don't want to be a Masonic Riding Association, if you don't want to be an extension of your fraternity, there are plenty of motorcycle riding associations out there, right? In fact, the current original Widow Sons are a motorcycle riding association. They're not Masonic. And easy, go on Sunbiz and look at it. We are the Widow Sons Masonic Riding Association of Florida. They are the Widow Sons Motorcycle Riding Association of Florida, right?
Okay, so there are now two Widow Sons officially, although they have slightly different names, and one is affiliated with Masonry and one is not.
Correct. However, the one that's not affiliated with Masonry would say they are affiliated, but, on the down low.
How can they make that argument when they're not? I mean,
well, it's pretty easy to make the argument whenever you're talking about your intent behind the argument. Of my intention is for this to be a Masonic Riders Association, but, and then we can get into the fact that they don't want to bend the knee to Grand Lodge.
There is
so in their mind, and I'm not taking one side or the other here. I hope y'all guys don't think it like that. But I'm trying to break down the argument of trying to see the both sides of.
Here we go.
3, 2, 1, fight.
Get over here. So I'm just trying to break down the argument, because it seems like you do have these group of brothers that they are considering themselves Masonic, although they are not officially labeled as Masonic. But who cares if you're officially labeled as Masonic or not? Because I don't want to bend the knee to Grand Lodge anyway. So I totally see that aspect, and I also completely.
You have to be disingenuous. Then you have to be disingenuous. You have to be. You have to.
Yeah.
Lie. You have. To. There's no way around it. It's the minute they were all Masons. Look, now you got 4701, 4702, and 4703 to contend with in the digest.
Yeah.
So you got to go, we're not Masons. Oh, okay, you're not Masons. Well,
Okay. So yeah, okay, I see that argument. And then I also see your... No. I also see your side of it, and your side of it is, hey, let's just color within the lines here. This isn't that big of a deal. So kind of walk us through kind of your intention behind forming or I should say playing nice with the Grand Lodge. I mean, is this in direct competition with the other group of the Widow's Sons? What's going on here?
My intent was this: submit the paperwork. I submitted it as the state president, because you have to. The state president of the group that you're intending that get recognized and approved has to sign the paperwork. Tyrian Riders just did it back in January. Low 12 did it many years ago, right? In fact, Pascal Vest
first of his name.
was the founder of the Low 12. So I submitted it, and quite frankly, it's a placeholder, right? If you're a lawyer or anybody like that, I could switch a president out in 5 seconds. I honest to God can. And I formed the Florida Corporation because it's a 5013C, and you have to have a corp, and I did it. And again, I put myself as president, but I could change that right now, talking to you without you even knowing it. It'll take me 2 seconds. So it was all done as a placeholder to have this entity created. And you notice the names are very similar. In fact, the initials are exactly the same, to be able to present it to the craft and say, look, we now can be Masonic. Who wants to be Masonic? And then if everyone said they didn't want to be Masonic, then I would be faced with either just shit can. Well, we're on a podcast, right? And I just said the word shit can. That's a military term. I could shit can the new thing I created and stay with the Widow's Sons, or I could change the name, or I could keep the name. The reason I can keep the name is the name Widow's Sons refers to all Masons, number one. Number two, there's no ownership interest in that name. It's been out in the public domain too long for there to be any ownership interest in it, so no one can trademark it, copyright it, or anything else. There are past examples where we've had more than one Widow's Son organization within the same state. Louisiana's one. In fact, in Florida, we had two at one point for a very brief period of time. So one of the reasons why you want the Widow's Sons name is because although we are all independent states, in other words, Florida doesn't answer to Alabama, Alabama doesn't answer to Florida. You know what I mean? We're all independent. Widow's Sons are all independent. They're not really one giant group. It's little groups all named the same thing, because they have a lot of rallies and stuff, and they'll be opened only to Widow's Sons, right? And it's really cool to ride out to Oklahoma or Chicago and go to a giant rally filled with literally 2,000 Masons from across the world. I don't mean the country, I mean the world. And meeting all these guys. And, I've got friends in Mexico. I got friends in Canada. I got friends in Argentina. Everywhere. I got guys text me from Argentina. Hey, we're going to be in Miami. Can you help us out? Yeah, man. What do you need? You need a motorcycle? What do you, let's go. And it's great. So that's really, the Tyrian Riders can't go to a Widow's Son event in Chicago because they're the Tyrian Riders and it's open to Widow's Sons only, right? So that's the benefit of having the Widow's Sons name. Now, we may get blackballed from all these things because of what's happening in Florida until the dust settles, right? There's a lot of positive things that were written, but there's also a lot of negative things because people don't understand. Right. And I thought in my statement, I said my intent was not to hijack the Widow's Sons, right? And then everyone started using the word hijack. I'm like, yeah, you thought that up yourself, huh? No. So
Well, no, it almost seems like you and I operate very similarly. So it's not the exact same scenario, but I've had it before where it's like, all right, I have a craft that I have to present this to. So I do all this work on the front end and then present it to the craft. So it almost seems like that's what you were doing of, hey, I've already done all the heavy lifting of every single bit of this. Now it's up to you guys if you want it or not. And guess what? If you don't want it, I can dissolve it with a click of a button. It's that fast.
Literally 100%. That's what it is. So, that's where we're at. Instead, it went over like, a lead balloon or a fart in church, whichever one you prefer, whichever metaphor. And everyone's like, you're trying to steal the widow sons. I am not trying to steal the widow sons. But just so you know, the guys that are with us are all widow sons, branded widow sons. Branding is a degree that's given within the widow sons. These guys, there's at least 50 to 100, probably 100. What gives the other 100 guys that we left behind the right to use the name, but not us? I've got 40 members in my chapter alone. Anchor and Arc has 11 members, so now you're up to 51. Hiram's Wheels got 20 members, now you're up to 71. Island Knights has 17 members. You start doing the numbers, you're like, that's a lot of guys. And how come the other group gets to use the widow son name, but we don't? You know what I mean? Like, we've earned the name just as much as they have. I've given more.
I mean, honestly, you're the only one rightfully that should be using the name because it is a Masonic
writing
reference. The widow's son is a Masonic reference. So,
correct.
Yeah. I mean, those guys that I've chosen not to, and I understand where they're coming from. Trust me. I was also persecuted a bit last year and also had very negative feelings about how that was being done. And I understand their frustration, but we are Masons first.
Correct.
We need to follow our obligation, which is let's do it the right way. Let's get everything lined up. Let's get our paperwork done. Let's get approved, which you've done. So really, there's no choice in my mind. Even if I was a disgruntled with the Grand Lodge guy from before, I would still want to be Masonic. And I always try to do the right thing by Masonry as a man. And I'm sure you guys do too.
That was our mantra was your Mason.
There's no choice here. Like, I need to be a member of the one that's recognized. That's it. Right.
So our mantra when I joined was you're a Mason first, you're a widow son second. Keep that in mind.
Right.
Always act like a Mason. Okay.
Well, and even still to kind of build on this, and Burns, you and I have talked about this quite a bit, is that if your perception of authority is that, if the opposite party is in there and you're just absolutely terrified about that, then that authority has too much authority. And I'm talking about the president of the United States specifically. If it freaks you out that the other side won for the next 4 years, then that position holds too much weight. So in that, if the widow's sons who are now not recognized by the Grand Lodge of Florida, if that is a concern for you, that you don't want to bend the knee to somebody who you think could be tyrannical, you could very easily draft legislation in order to kind of shackle the Grand Master seat a little bit or put a little bit more checks and balances in. So this is a war that can be won, but it has to be a long-term ordeal.
And you need to be doing it. You can't change that from the outside.
Right.
You only change it from the inside.
So my intent and Most Worshipful Grand Master Tally's intent was hopefully that everyone would come over and we could merge them. And that he told me, look, at this time next year, I hope you have 100 chapters. He wants us to grow. He wants us because it helps Masonry. It shines a light on Masonry. We're the pole bearers for Masonry. We raise a lot of money. We could help. We can help the Masonic home. I want to say the First Lady's charity this year is the third floor of the Masonic home to build a rehab facility. We're going to raise a bunch of money for that to help that because I think that's a great cause, right, for all the people in the Masonic home. And that's a far cry from what I was understanding was happening last year. So, you know what I mean? Like, that's the intent. We really want to bring them together. And, maybe my delivery was wrong or bad, or I don't know. I'm pretty straightforward. I'm not good at sugarcoating stuff. I'm not good at finessing. You tell me to do something, I can do it. And I get it done, usually pretty fast, efficiently, and effectively.
And you did. You're now recognized by the Grand Lodge of Florida. You're now officially back as a Masonic Writers Association. And you have members, right? Yes. People have signed up and are officially members.
Yeah, no, we have a lot. We have people that used to be widow sons calling us saying, hey, can I come back now that you're a Masonic Writing Association? Right. And I say, of course, here's a petition. We've got guys that, like, from a long time ago, I still have my motorcycle. Can I come back? Yes, you're a branded widow son. You can come back. We're now again a Masonic Riding Association. I'm telling you, like people I've never even heard of, and I've been in it for 6 years. You know what I mean?
So, and I just want to be clear about this specifically for the listeners. What you're saying is that you did the heavy lifting, you created this organization, you set yourself as the president, but
As a placeholder.
exactly as a placeholder. So you are willing, ready, and able to give this power up at a drop of a hat.
Correct.
Okay.
There's one caveat that they have to change the back patch, and there's a lot of guys that don't want to do that because they're in love with that anime. But that anime causes more problems than good, right? And maybe we could make it a front patch as an homage to the original. Why they're in love with it, I don't know. If you think about it, this was just something one guy picked back in 1999. There's no real, oh my God, that's our roots. It's not.
Right. Right.
He picked an anime. He could have easily have picked the pyramid with wings, and we'd all have pyramid and wings, but he didn't. So the change, a lot of guys just they fall in love with the patch. And I wrote a piece that said, look, it's not the patch, it's not the vest, it's not even the name, guys. It's the brotherhood. It's the working together. It's the Masonic, uh, principles.
Right.
That's what it's about. I mean,
Right. The patch doesn't make you anything.
no,
It's just
no.
an object that has no meaning in reality.
Correct. So, I learned through Most Worship Grandmaster Tally that the line hates our patch. Like they all hate it, like universally. I heard from other states that everyone hates our patch. I've heard from brothers who said they were going to join the Widow Sons but didn't want to because they didn't want that patch. I sent you where the patch came from, Chris. I mean, it's, you know what I mean? There's nothing. It'd be
It's
one thing.
not really a Masonic.
No, it'd be one thing if you said,
Anything
this
Masonic.
is Hiram Abrit. This is a picture of Hiram Abit's wife or something. Okay. Or
Honestly, that's what a lot of, because I would, we had a whole wall dedicated to the Widow Sons in our lodge, and that was a big centerpiece, was that patch.
right. And now I just sent you the picture it came from, which is a Japanese, Japanese anime sexy ninja.
It blows my mind because I had no idea where it came from until you just sent me that. And
Right.
I brought a lot of guys into the fraternity, and they would look at that and go, so is that the Widow Son's wife? And I'd be like, it might be. Honestly, I don't know. So there is a lot of people that just assume that that's supposed to represent the Widow Son's wife.
There's
not true, apparently.
There's a thing a guy wrote, and it's touching. It's supposed to symbolize a widow with an ashen face, finding out that her husband, who was a Mason, died, and concerned about how she's going to survive without him and raise her children. So I get that. That symbolism is nice, but it's made up after the fact, just so you know.
Right,
it's like,
right.
all right, how do we justify this sexy ninja on the back of our jacket, our vest? I got it. Let me come up with this statement about her being an ashen, widow. It's just not Masonic. The one we did is Masonic, and it's a copy loosely on the other states, and we wanted it to look enough like the other states so that we're blended in. And quite frankly, right. So there are other countries and other states that have modified it slightly, right? So the wings and the working tools and the pyramid and if you go on the internet and you look, you'll see like 5 different similar but not the same back sets that we picked. So anyway, that's why we picked that. We wanted to kind of blend in.
It sounds like it comes down to
we want to
these
unify.
Brothers don't like change. Nobody likes change. It's
Correct.
hard to do change, and you're making a change, and
right.
So there is going to be resistance. I get that. I think you're trying to be sympathetic to them too, right? And say, look, man, I understand why you're upset, but like this is what it is, and like we've met all the rules, and just come home.
Right, and
just come home and be with us.
And believe it or not, one of the biggest sticking point will be the back patch. And I would say, look, if 90% of the world had the Elvira on the back, I'd say you're right. Let's stick with it. We're the only ones with it, man. Yeah. I'm telling you. You go through all 50 other states, they got the pyramided wings. You go to other countries, they all have the pyramided wings. Go on the internet and look. I mean,
it can be a little embarrassing when you're the only one holding on to something that everyone else has already moved past. I mean, like Florida was one of the few jurisdictions that doesn't recognize Prince Hall.
Right.
And to me, as a Mason, that was always like a black eye on us as a Mason.
A little embarrassing. Right.
So it's like, let's get on board with everybody else and get this done. I don't see the problem in that. I do understand that people are going to resist that.
No,
However,
100%. Right.
it's like in anything. You go to your Blue Lodge, some idea comes up that you disagree with, you stand up and you fervently state your views, and somebody else states theirs, and the craft decides. When that decision's made, you need to get on board.
Right.
You had your say, you had your chance, it went another way. So now it's time to be a good Mason and go with the will of the craft.
Right. And remember, you're a Mason first.
And so, how are you feeling now that this is kind of all, it's all fresh, right? This is all coming out.
Yeah. So I feel terrible. I have a lot of friends, like people I used to talk to every day. Jim Bay being one of them, the president, I'll talk to him all the time. So I feel terrible that they either misunderstood or think I was trying to do something sneaky because I wasn't, or trying to steal something because I'm not. I'm telling you, man, I run a 50-man law firm in 6 offices in multiple states. The last thing I need is more responsibility to govern someone else. I got to be honest with you. My job, I work 12, 14 hours a day. I don't need to run a motorcycle riding association. I'd rather just be part of the motorcycle riding association, the Masonic Motorcycle Riding Association. I'm president of my chapter, which takes a lot of time in and of itself. Do you really think I want to be president of a state as well? I don't. I just wanted to get it set up, get it done right, and then be able to make it right for everyone. I mean,
well, I imagine what's going to happen now is you will have a meeting at some point of the, what do you call it, the CO.
Yeah, I won't be at it though. That's the problem, right? They won't allow me at it. They had a CO.
Well, I imagine you'll have your own now because this is an organization, right? So
yeah,
you'll have your own meeting at some point,
sure.
and you as an organization will pick your own leadership moving forward, right?
Correct.
So it's gonna naturally fix itself.
Yeah. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying, with these other guys where he's like, it's a power grab. I'm like,
right.
100% not a power grab. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm happy to help. I'm happy to do whatever you need legally. I was doing that for the old organization. I'm the one, when they wanted to change the name, that changed the name. I'm the one that wrote all their bylaws. Literally all their bylaws are written by me. That took a lot of time. Now, when you say, did it cost me money? It did cost me money because it took me 20, 30 hours. And guess what I wasn't doing during those 20, 30 hours? Billing clients at $850 an hour. I wasn't doing that. So I wasn't making any money. So
I can't afford you as a lawyer. $850.
I give you guys a really good break. Trust me.
Okay.
Really good break. We call it the friends and family rate. Most times I don't charge at all. Because that's what Masonic brothers do. My brother's kid got in trouble. I had to handle it, get it dismissed. I didn't charge my brother, right? I got another brother. He wasn't getting paid. I had to go after the people that didn't pay him. He got paid. What do I owe you? You owe me a beer. Give me a beer. You know what I mean? Like, I make enough money doing other stuff. I don't need to charge my brothers. Now, if you give me a case that takes me 10 hours a day for a year, I'm going to have to charge you. But,
what did you do?
That said, I feel terrible that they now all hate me. I'm public enemy number one, that they're misunderstanding my intentions. And, quite frankly, it just kind of took on a life of its own with this. You know what I mean? The only reason we had the other back patches made were because we knew what the Grand Line was, and everything else. So
hypothetically,
right.
Just as a hypothetical, if those guys came back to this new organization, including the leadership,
right.
You would have no problem with seeing them reelected to the leadership of the new organization, right?
Correct.
Yeah, when the time comes and the
December,
made,
January, whatever it is. Yeah,
you wouldn't be mad about that. You would be welcome to that.
100%. They come right over, every single one. Now we're a Masonic Riding Association, like we were when we joined this damn thing, and in fact,
right now, you have this responsibility. You are the president.
Right.
This is the organization that is recognized. So
I'm setting up infrastructure. I'm doing all this stuff.
Yep.
And, I told everyone that went in this endeavor, I said, there's a good chance they want to come over, and they want to keep the Elvira patch. And then we're going to have to go talk to Grand Lodge. I think it's going to go badly. But I'm just saying, you know what I mean? Like,
Does
just
the
think
patch
about
have
that.
to be approved by Grand Lodge when you
No,
submit?
no, it doesn't. But
Okay.
you don't want, it does not, but
It's not
politically,
part of the official process, but it's like an unofficial thing that you
yeah,
want
I
them to
mean,
be okay
you
with it,
really
right?
want every time the guy looks at it go,
Yeah.
right, no.
Plus, you've kind of just gone with the rest of the country, which is kind of a no-brainer in my mind. Like,
Yeah, the
just
rest of the country, the
standardize it.
rest of the world.
Yeah,
Just
the
forget.
rest.
We got them in Australia, we got them in Ireland, we got them in France, Italy, Bulgaria, Hungary. We got them everywhere, buddy. It's pretty amazing.
Really do feel bad for those brothers that are on the other side of this because I know, I mean, you probably feel like they hate you, but I doubt that they actually hate you. I think there's just a lot of confusion right now. And this is all happening fast to them,
Sure.
right? To them, it seems like it's happening fast. So my hope is that when the information gets out and they really look at it without the emotions, they'll hopefully their better senses will rule and they'll come back to like let's just be Masonic together again and
Back to
try to
Masonry
follow these rules and like let's get back to raising money, doing charity and having fun and being brothers.
and come back to Masonry.
Well, and honestly, if I could try to broker a little bit of peace here, one thing that I noticed last year is whenever you have trying to think of a polite way to say this, when you have rules that are being enforced in an aggressive manner, what that'll typically do to those that are having the rules enforced upon them is it'll start to splinter and cause division. That
Yeah.
isn't contention between that party. That's exterior force being applied. So the brothers on both sides of this conversation, and from what it sounds like the brothers that are not recognized by Grand Lodge right now, y'all guys have to understand is that there's still good intention being done and performed on the opposite side of this argument. It was an exterior force that created this contention in the first place. So it makes most sense in the world to just, all right, let the tempers calm down a little bit, let the temperature cool down. Let's come back together. Let's have a reconciliation.
Agreed. And that's what I want.
That's going to be your challenge is having to work
I'll,
through that now.
I'll earn that certified by the Supreme Court of Florida as a mediator. I think I'll earn that badge if I'm able to do this.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on and helping us understand and helping the listeners kind of understand better what's going on in the Widow Sons and what led you here and what you're doing now.
Widow Sons is a great organization. As we say, Widow Sons forever, forever Widow Sons. Really
if
is.
someone wants to join the Widow Sons or if you have a member of the old Widow Sons that wants to come back, how can they reach you? What's the best way to do that?
The email is probably the best way. My email address is CW, that's Charlie Whiskey, at WMD, that's Weapons of Mass Destruction, law, LAW.org, O-R-G. Yes, it was done on purpose. Yes, it was formed back in the day.
I saw that in your email and I thought, nah, it's got to mean something else.
I love that email. Everything from the Charlie Whiskey on.
So that's my email address. That's one of the fastest ways to get hold of me. Shoot me an email. I've already sent out 3 or 4 petitions from old brothers that want to come back, and I'm happy they do. And we can get to the business of being Widow Sons, having fun, fellowship, raising money for charity, and being good Masons.
Is there anything as we go on the way out that you would like to share with the fraternity? Not even necessarily just the Widow Sons, but you have an opportunity here to speak to Masons all over the world. What would you tell them?
The Widow Sons as a whole, when I joined Masonry, they say to make good men better. And it was always my opinion that the Widow Sons were the best of the better, right? These were guys that held in high regard. Brotherhood actually meant brotherhood. You're stuck on the side of the road at 4 a.m. You call me, I get up, I put my shoes on, I'm there. You get arrested, you call me, I'm going to the jail, I'm getting you out. That's what it's convenient to be a brother when it's easy. When you're a brother when it's inconvenient, that's when you have a true brother. And in the Widow Sons, that's kind of how it was. We were true brothers and good Masons. So for the rest of the world, the Widow Sons is a great organization. It's the best of the better, in my opinion. And, I hope this works out in the state of Florida. I'm sure it will. One way or another, the dust will settle and it'll work out. And we'll get back to the business of being good Masons, working hand in hand with the Grand Lodge, which is what cements your relationship with the Grand Lodge. And riding motorcycles and having fun.
Love it. Great message. Thank you for coming on and being with us and sharing your morning. Matt, anything for the brothers on our way out?
Nope. May peace and brotherly love prevail.
Thank you
I
so
think,
much.
we are all, Widow Sons is just one aspect of the fallout from last year. The entire state is going through some form of trying to come back together, trying to find normalcy, so.
It was very divisive last year,
Yeah, it was
much
tough.
like our politics, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It was like, man, it infected everything. Everybody was very divisive, and we got to be.
Still, it's very divisive, and the root of all of this, is we've stopped talking to each other.
Correct.
That's the reason we had so much chaos last year, because they gagged the state. They said, we're not going to talk. We don't want you talking. We're not talking about this. And it just caused so many problems. And it's the same thing in politics. I can't talk to you if you don't think like me, because you're evil. You're the bad guy.
Instead, they should have joined the conversation. You understand?
Right. That's the key. We got to talk about this together.
If you join the conversation and you can educate and explain, then it's above the board, right? And that's what you need. So when you try to stifle the conversation, that's a problem. When you refuse to speak to someone else because they don't think like you, well, then how are you ever going to get another perspective? How are you ever going to understand their position?
Right.
How do you even know your position's right? You may talk to me for 10 minutes and I may go, you know what? You're right. I see your position.
Yeah.
I may not say it out loud, but in my mind, I'll say it. And then, right? Because everyone's got an ego. And then tomorrow I'm espousing your position because what you said was correct.
Right.
So you got to listen, man. You got to just you got to get open heart, I guess, is the best way to say it. I don't know. I don't want to sound too corny. But,
well, and here's the thing that I've kind of discovered is you also have to trust your brother's intention. That's one thing that I noticed real big last year is as I was trying to work, this angle at Turkey Creek, I had brothers that were pissed. I mean, furious with me. And I'm like, no, you need to understand my intention behind this. And my intention behind this is for the good of Turkey Creek, the good of the craft, the good of you name it. I'm trying to do the most good here. But instead, because you're not having that conversation, because you're not talking and keeping communication flowing, they think the worst of you. And that's a bad place to be, man. It really is.
Yeah. As soon as you start making assumptions, you're immediately wrong.
100%.
But you're operating like something that you're very confident that you do.
You're saying something with such confidence and authority that people are like, that must be true. It's not.
Right. We lie to ourselves all the time, and our worst enemy is our ego.
Oh,
it's the enemy of man is the ego. We have
to admit you're wrong, or to admit the other side is right. You almost can't do it, right? It hurts. You're like,
I honestly don't know what you guys are talking about. I get up every day, look in the mirror and say, you've got a phenomenal head of hair. You are just so handsome.
Look, buddy, I'm not far behind you. I mean, this hairline keeps going and going and going.
It's on a full-blown retreat.
I'm with you, man. I'm getting this weird.
Right? Yeah, I mean, it's
so here's the thing, and we've said it on the show before, but I'm on TRT, and so it's so funny because all of this is not coming back, but dadgummit, I have got hair on my back that is insane. Like, if all of y'all could just move to the proper location, that'd be great.
Buddy, I know the feeling. Trust me, I know the feeling.
Spades, what's up, brother?
Yes, thank you. We do appreciate it. Thank you very much. Hopefully you'll come back on the podcast and keep us updated as things progress.
Yeah, man, anytime. All right. Thank you so much.
On the Level podcast is out.